The KINGMAN FLATS. A short story written by Kavee. Some journeys begin with intention, others begin with interruption. A mishap, a town you never planned to stop in. And sometimes, those are the journeys that stay with you forever. This is a story about silence, about strangers who feel familiar far too quickly, and about two people who discovered that not every encounter needs to come from the stars to change the way we see ourselves. They had married only 3 weeks ago, long enough for the rings to stop feeling foreign, short enough that every shared silence still felt like a discovery. Jessie, 27, all clean lines and startup confidence, had insisted on the drive. No flights, no rushing, just asphalt, horizon, and his modified Jeep Wrangler humming westward along Route 66. Maya, 26, a high school literature teacher with a laugh that arrived half a second before her smile, had agreed because she trusted him and because she secretly loved the idea of stories beginning the old way, on the road. Arizona gave them silence in layers, red earth, long shadows, wind that seemed to remember things. The sun was lowering when the steering wheel jerked, sharp, sudden, and the Jeep sagged with a defeated sigh. Then a puncture, of course. The steering wheel shuddered, the car dipped, and the road answered with a dull, unforgiving rhythm. Jessie eased them to the shoulder as if the desert itself had decided, gently but firmly, that they were done moving forward. That was when they saw it. The weathered sign for KINGMAN stood in the distance, sun-faded and unassuming, its letters worn smooth by decades of passing glances. It had never been a destination on their plans, hadn't even been a name they recognized. If it had come up before, it hadn't stayed. And yet there it was, waiting. They rolled in on the spare tire just as dusk folded the sky into bruised purples and burnt orange. KINGMAN was quieter than Maya expected. Not empty, just unhurried. Neon signs flickered awake one by one, like old men stretching their joints. The tire shop was closed. Of course it was. By 6:30, the town had already begun to fold in on itself. KINGMAN didn't run on city time, it obeyed the sun. As dusk settled, shutters came down, lights went out, and work was quietly abandoned for the day. Whatever needed fixing would wait until morning. The streets felt gently emptied, as if everyone had finished their conversations, washed their hands of the day, and retreated to familiar rooms. Not deserted, just resting. Their problem, small and inconvenient, floated in that pause. And KINGMAN, unhurried and unapologetic, offered only one solution: stay. Jessie didn't argue with the obvious. "We stay," he said, not frustrated, almost relieved. A motel sat a block off the main drag, low, warm, unapologetically old. A horseshoe of rooms wrapped around a courtyard with a single crepe myrtle and 2 mismatched rocking chairs. Yellow light spilled from the office window, soft as candle glow. They weren't quite sure why they chose that one. They passed a few other motels, similar signs, similar promises, yet something about the one on the corner made Jessie slow down. No discussion, no reasoning. He simply signaled, turned, and eased the car into the gravel car park. Maybe it was the way the light pooled softly around the entrance. or the quiet confidence of a place that didn't try too hard. Whatever it was, it felt sufficient. They didn't need luxury, didn't want distraction. What they needed was simple and immediate. A hot shower to wash the road off their skin, something warm to eat, and a bed to surrender the day to. Just the bare minimum to carry them through the night, long enough to fix the puncture in the morning and move on. Starlane Motor Inn was run by Edna and Harold, who looked like they'd been married longer than Maya's parents had been alive. Edna wore a lavender cardigan and kindness like it was stitched into her bones. Harold moved slowly, but his eyes were alert, amused, like he'd seen everything and found most of it entertaining. "You're just in time," Edna said, sliding the key across the counter. A real key. Heavy brass, room 12, clean sheets, fresh coffee at dawn. They thanked her, took the key, and had just turned to leave when Edna made a small sound, half a gasp, half a remembered thought. They paused. "The bar next door stays open till 10, she said, almost conspiratorial, her smile warm and unassuming. "Only if you don't mind." It wasn't a suggestion so much as a kindness, one quietly looking out for another. The room smelled faintly of lemon polish and desert dust. A crocheted blanket lay folded at the foot of the bed. Outside, cicadas tuned their instruments. They shared the shower, not just because that's what newlyweds do, but because the bathroom invited it. Unexpectedly spacious, tiled in soft, time-worn cream, it held warmth the moment the water began to run. Steam gathered lazily, blurring edges, easing the day out of their muscles. There was no rush, no agenda to meet. Just the quiet intimacy of being close, of washing dust and road and small inconveniences away together. For a place meant to be temporary, the room seemed to understand comfort far better than it needed to. Dinner was necessary, not negotiable. And the bar next door presented itself as the obvious solution. Neither of them felt like wandering the streets, weighing menus against hunger, searching for something marginally better. The day had already asked enough of them. Simplicity was its own luxury now. What Edna had recommended would be good enough. More than good enough, they decided. There was a quiet trust in her words, in the way she'd offered the suggestion without selling it. And so, without overthinking it, they chose ease and stepped back out into the soft Kingman evening. The Copper Coyote Tavern sat on the other side of the road, a natural companion to the Starlane Motor Inn, as if the two had grown old together. The place wore its age proudly. Weathered wood, dulled brass, and walls crowded with decades of memorabilia. License plates, yellowed photographs, framed newspaper clippings, trinkets whose stories no one remembered but everyone respected. The mantel was cluttered with keepsakes, glass showcases guarded relics from another pace of life. Behind the bar stood a man and a woman in their 50s, moving with the effortless coordination of people who'd shared both work and time. No hurry, no wasted motion. They knew the room. A handful of tables were already occupied, some by couples leaning toward one another in low conversation, others by grown men laughing too loudly, voices roughened by drink and familiarity. No one seemed out of place. The air was thick with the smell of food, grilled, fried, comforting, and the sound of happiness. Not loud joy, not polished cheer. Just the honest hum of a place doing exactly what it had always done. Feed people, hold their stories, and let the night pass gently through. They chose a table tucked into a quiet corner, away from the louder clusters, and handed over their order without ceremony. The waitress lingered for a moment, her smile apologetic but sincere. "If you don't mind," she said gently, "the food might take a little while. We're a bit short in the kitchen tonight. You're welcome to grab a drink at the bar meanwhile." Neither hesitated. Jessie nodded. Maya smiled. It felt reasonable, almost expected. They thanked her, rose together, and crossed the room to the bar. The bar lady greeted them with easy familiarity, as if she'd been expecting them all evening. 2 beers were poured at their request, amber and alive, foam cresting just right. They stood there, hands wrapped around cold glasses, trading light conversation with her, nothing deep, nothing forced. Just names where they were from the road. Laughter came easily. For strangers passing through, they were already beginning to feel oddly welcome. As Jessie turned back toward their table, his elbow clipped someone standing closer than he'd realized. The collision was soft but decisive. The beer sloshed, then spilled, amber liquid arcing down his arm and splattering across his trousers, sudden and messy, like the aftermath of a teenage water gun ambush. "Oh, God, I'm so sorry," Jessie said immediately, already setting his glass down. The bar lady slid a napkin across without a word. Jessie grabbed it, dabbing awkwardly, mortified, apologizing again as if volume might undo the moment. Maya stepped in beside him, instinctively smooth, her voice gentle and disarming. "He's hopeless with spatial awareness," she said with a small, apologetic smile, a hand briefly touching Jessie's arm. "I promise he means no harm." They were both flushed now, embarrassed, flustered, doing everything they could to diffuse the situation before it hardened into something unpleasant. It was the kind of accident that shouldn't matter, yet suddenly felt like it might. For a breath or two, the air held still, waiting to see what kind of night this was going to become. The man, now wearing most of Jessie's beer, was calm. Maya noticed it first and felt a small wave of relief wash through her chest. "I hope you'll be paying for my expensive clothes," he said, his voice suddenly serious, almost formal. Jessie and Maya exchanged a glance, lost, puzzled, uneasy. The face didn't quite match the tone, and for a second neither of them knew how to read him. "These are designer," the man continued, inspecting the damp fabric with theatrical concern. "Bought in Paris." The silence stretched just long enough. Then he broke. Laughter burst out of him, full and unrestrained, the kind that couldn't be held back even if one tried. The seriousness dissolved instantly, replaced by an easy grin. It took them a heartbeat to catch up, to realize the joke, the play, the harmless mischief of it. When they did, the tension evaporated just as quickly. Jessie laughed, exhaling the embarrassment. Maya shook her head, smiling wide. The man waved it off with a chuckle, utterly at ease, the victim of their clumsiness, yes, but clearly not a man interested in carrying offense through the night. "Let me offer you a replacement," the man said, already signaling toward the bar. Before Jessie could protest or even properly agree, the bar lady was pouring a fresh beer. She slid the glass into Jessie's hand with a knowing smile, as if this were simply how things were done here. The exchange happened so quickly that Jessie barely had time to process it, let alone say thank you. He stood there, momentarily stunned, foam settling at the rim. The man noticed. "You two look alien," he said, squinting playfully. "That did it." The bartender and the bar lady grinned in unison. "He's almost green," the bartender added. "Sure looks like one of the aliens from the 50s crash landing." Laughter rippled outward. A few people nearby chimed in, tossing comments across the room, something about flying saucers, desert lights, government cover-ups, UFOs, visitors from nowhere. The jokes layered over one another, half serious, half myth, entirely local. Jessie and Maya laughed too, together. They didn't catch half of what was being said. References lost, timelines blurred, but it didn't matter. They laughed anyway, buoyed by the warmth of the moment, by the way strangers had folded them effortlessly into the room. Whatever the jokes meant, they felt welcome inside them. Time loosened its grip on them. Somewhere between the second round of beers and the shared plates drifting across the table, Jessie and Maya realized they were no longer just talking, they were belonging. Jokes were exchanged freely. Drinks were offered without asking. Someone slid a fork across so they could taste something you've gotta try. It felt less like a bar and more like a family gathering that had forgotten to explain how everyone was related. They were no longer two strangers passing through a strange town. They were, improbably, among their own. One man, broad-shouldered and sunburned, turned out to be the tire shop owner. He promised, hand on heart, to look at their car first thing in the morning. Early, he emphasized, as if dawn were a personal favor. Another offered breakfast at his place, insisting with genuine enthusiasm. They declined only with difficulty, apologizing repeatedly, explaining they'd already committed to breakfast at the inn. The rejection was accepted, though not without mock disappointment. The bar lady, it emerged, was related to the innkeepers, distant but close enough, she said, waving off the details. A towering, bald man, easily 7 feet it seemed, turned out to be the town sheriff, blissfully off duty and enjoying it. He raised his glass but said little, his presence alone commanding easy respect. One woman claimed her father had been at the UFO crash site. Another nodded eagerly, adding that her parents had owned the ranch nearby. Someone else leaned in, lowering his voice, and declared without irony that his parents had seen real aliens. Not lights, not shadows, aliens. Nearly everyone, it seemed, had seen something. Strange lights, silent crafts, shapes that didn't belong to planes or helicopters or anything with sensible explanations. Discs, triangles, things that moved wrong. Jessie and Maya listened, smiling, laughing, nodding, utterly unsure where truth ended and storytelling began. They couldn't tell what was a joke, what was an exaggeration, and what might be a memory polished smooth by years of repetition. Maybe everyone was trying to impress them. Maybe they were just keeping the night alive. Or maybe, just maybe, this town knew things outsiders didn't. Either way, Jessie squeezed Maya's hand under the table. As she squeezed back. And for the moment, that was enough. The man, Cal Mercer, still carrying the faint, yeasty scent of spilled beer in his clothes, leaned back in his chair and smiled at them. "If you'd like a tour," he said casually, as if offering directions to the post office, "I can take you up there tomorrow." The words hung in the air for a moment, heavier than they sounded. Jesse and Maya exchanged a glance, then turned back to him together, shaking their heads, not dismissive, just gently resolute. Gratitude first. Then regret. "We'd love to," Maya said, meaning it. "But we really have to be back on the road," Jesse added, "as soon as the tire's done." They apologized more than necessary, as travelers often do when turning down kindness. Cal waved it off with an easy shrug, unoffended, understanding. The offer hadn't been a transaction, it had been an opening. "Another time, then," he said, lifting his glass. And somehow, in the way he said it, it didn't feel like an ending at all. Later, after dinner was finished and laughter still lingering, they said their goodbyes. Promises were made lightly, as such promises always are, meant more for the moment than the calendar. They stepped out of the Copper Coyote with warm faces and easy smiles, carrying the afterglow of shared stories and borrowed belonging. The night air was cooler now, the desert finally exhaling. Together, they crossed the road and made their way back to the motel, full, unhurried, and quietly surprised by how much a single evening in an unfamiliar town could feel like home. As they passed the office on their way in, they noticed the light was still on. Edna sat behind the counter, glasses low on her nose, sorting through papers with the patient focus of someone who had never learned how to rush. Maya slowed, then stopped. The question surfaced again, inevitable now, almost waiting for its moment. "So, what do people do around here?" Edna looked up. Her expression didn't change much, but her eyes did, brightening slightly, catching something unspoken. Not excitement exactly, more like recognition, as if Maya had just stepped onto a familiar path. "Well," she said, lowering her voice just enough to feel intimate, "there's the old railroad museum. And the canyon roads, if you like driving nowhere in particular." She paused, just a breath too long. Then, almost offhandedly, she added, "or the crash site." The words settled softly between them, carrying more weight than their casual delivery suggested. Maya blinked. "Crash site. UFO," Edna said, as if discussing weather. "Out past the desert flats. Folks say something came down there years back. Lights, silence, army trucks by morning." They saw Harold in the far corner, grunted softly, neither confirming nor denying. Jesse glanced at Maya. She shrugged, smiling lightly. Neither of them believed in aliens. Truth be told, they hadn't given the idea much thought at all, at least not until dinner at the bar. That single evening had delivered more UFO stories than the rest of their lives combined. Lights, shapes, encounters, crash sites. It was almost comical in its density. Almost. Kingman, however, wasn't offering many alternatives. And there was something in the way Edna mentioned it, no theatrics, no attempt to sell wonder, that made the suggestion linger longer than it should have. Just a fact, placed gently on the table. The whole town talks about this, Maya realized. That can't be just for giggles. The thought stayed with her as they headed toward their room. heavier than curiosity, lighter than belief, but impossible to dismiss. "Well," Jessie said, light and easy, "we don't have all day tomorrow." Edna smiled wider, undecided. "Thought you might." "Well," Jessie said softly, breaking the quiet, "let's see after fixing the tire." He sounded practical, grounded, like someone gently closing a door without locking it. Probably best to leave that decision for tomorrow. Maya nodded. It felt right. The day had already been full in ways they hadn't planned for. Curiosity could wait. What they needed now was simpler: a bed, rest. The kind of sleep that smooths the edges of thought and leaves questions suspended until morning. They slipped into their room, turned out the lights, and let the desert night take over, unaware of how little tomorrow would resemble anything they expected. They woke early, strangely early for newlyweds of their generation, the kind who usually treated mornings as optional and alarms as hostile suggestions. Maya rose first. She always did. Teaching had carved that habit into her bones long before Jessie entered her life. Years of bell schedules and first-period essays had trained her body to wake before the sun, alert and slightly tense, as if a classroom might materialize at any moment. Even on a road trip, even on her honeymoon, her internal clock refused to forget who she was. Jessie stirred a few minutes later, blinking into the pale desert light leaking through the curtains. He was not an early bird, never had been. His work didn't demand it. Deals were made over late calls, not dawn coffees. Mornings, to him, were negotiable. Yet he woke anyway, not because he had to, but because she did. He watched Maya pull on her sweater, still half asleep herself, her movements quiet and practiced. There was comfort in the routine, hers and now theirs. So he sat up, rubbing his eyes, offering her the small luxury of not being alone in the morning. As she noticed. She always did. "You don't have to," she murmured. "I know," he said, voice rough with sleep. "I want to." Outside, Kingman was barely awake. The desert held its breath. And in that borrowed stillness, they shared coffee from paper cups, wrapped in motel quiet, two people learning, gently, how love reshapes even the simplest things. Breakfast was, by any objective measure, unremarkable. Carelessly folded scrambled eggs, toast a shade too pale. Bacon that had known a better life somewhere else. And yet they enjoyed it. The coffee especially was good, strong, honest. The kind that didn't pretend to be artisanal, but knew exactly what it was doing. Jessie went back for a second cup without thinking, cradling it in both hands like it mattered. Maya smiled into her mug, surprised by herself. She stayed in far better hotels, places with stainless steel counters, waffle stations, and names meant to impress. Yet this felt better, warmer. She decided it wasn't the food at all. It was the room. The creak of old timber beneath their feet. The way sunlight filtered through lace curtains, softening everything it touched. And most of all, the presence of Edna and Harold, moving slowly, speaking gently, smiling as if hospitality were not a service, but a habit formed over decades. The smiles lingered, not forced, not practiced, just there. They packed their bags with the quiet efficiency of people who believed they were only leaving briefly. Back into the car they went, morning still cool, heading toward the tire shop with the shared assumption that this would be quick, patch the puncture, swap out the spare, back on the road before lunch. That assumption didn't last long. The shop owner crouched by the wheel longer than Jesse liked, fingers pressing, eyes narrowing. When he stood, his expression had shifted, not alarmed, just firm. "Sidewall," he said plainly. "Not something you patch, wouldn't be safe. Especially not for a road trip that's only just begun." There was no hesitation from either of them. Of course, replace it, do it properly. That was when the second shoe dropped. No stock. He explained it without drama. The tire had to be brought in, likely from Flagstaff. Best case, it would arrive late evening. He could have it fitted before nightfall, but not much earlier. Then he added, almost as an afterthought, that it would be wiser to stay another night and drive out in the morning. Roads were safer then, visibility better, no need to rush. It felt non-negotiable, not because he insisted, but because it made perfect sense. This was the same man they'd laughed with the night before at the bar. Older than Maya's father, steady in the way age sometimes grants. He didn't sound like someone selling inconvenience. He sounded like someone protecting strangers who had briefly become his responsibility. Then he surprised them. "I've got an old Jeep," he said. "I'll loan you the spare tire, take your Jeep around town, do some sightseeing. That way you don't risk stranded if stumble with another puncture." He disappeared into the back and returned moments later, rolling a weathered spare tire, hanging it confidently on the rear door of their Jeep, stepped back, nodded. "You're good to go on your adventure," he said with a grin. "Just make sure you're back around 6. Your shiny new tire will be waiting." Maya called the motel right there, leaning against the shed. Edna answered without surprise. Of course she'd keep the room. Of course they'd be expected back. They thanked the tire shop owner, profusely, earnestly, then climbed into the Jeep. The engine turned over with a stubborn confidence. They pulled out onto the road again, the town opening around them. This time they had no schedule, no destination, and no real idea what they were about to do next. "The crash site," Maya said. Jesse didn't argue. He just nodded, once, an acknowledgement rather than a decision, as if the choice had already been made. Maya reached into her bag and unfolded a napkin she'd tucked away from the bar. The ink was smudged, the lines rough but unmistakably intentional. Someone, one of last night's acquaintances, she couldn't quite remember who, had sketched directions with surprising care. A bend in the road, a dry wash, near a reservoir written in block letters, underlined twice. She cross-checked it with her phone, fingers moving quickly now. A little searching, a little guessing. The map app protested at first, then relented, offering a destination that felt approximate rather than precise. Close enough. She handed the phone to Jesse. "That should get us somewhere," she said. He set the navigator, eased the Jeep back onto the road, and followed the line it drew across the desert, toward a place that had already found them, whether they believed in it or not. The drive stunned them into a shared, quiet awe. There was beauty in the barrenness and honesty to it. Emptiness stretched wide and unashamed, textured rather than dull. Red soil bled into sand, broken occasionally by boulders that looked as though they had been dropped there deliberately, arranged by a patient hand. Mountains loomed in the distance, their edges softened by heat and time, watching without comment. If nothing else, this alone made the delay worthwhile. This was not a road to regret. Every so often, a coyote appeared far off, lean and purposeful, crossing the land with a kind of urgent grace, as if always late for something important. Tumbleweeds, dry clumps of grass loosened by the season, rolled past with the wind, ghost-like in their movement, briefly alive before vanishing again. Autumn had begun its quiet work. Leaves were thinning, color draining, the landscape surrendering itself back to bone. Instead of feeling desolate, it felt ancient, stripped down to essentials. Maya rested her head against the window. Jesse kept his eyes on the road. Neither spoke. After a little over half an hour, the road gave up on them. Not abruptly, just gently tapered off, as if deciding it had taken them far enough. The Jeep rolled to a stop where asphalt surrendered to dust and open land. According to the napkin map, this was it. From here, the rest had to be earned on foot. About a mile, Maya said, rereading the smudged lines. Neither of them was dressed for a hike. No boots, no packs, no grand intention of walking into the desert that morning. Yet neither suggested turning back. Giving up felt stranger than continuing. They each grabbed a water bottle and left the Jeep by the roadside. In the distance stood a lone house, farm-like, low and quiet, no movement, no sound. They couldn't tell if it was abandoned or simply resting, like everything else out here. Still, its presence offered a subtle reassurance. Civilization hadn't completely vanished yet. That was enough. As they started walking, conversation returned, uneven, overlapping, a little chaotic. They tried to untangle the stories from the last night, but it was harder than expected. Jesse had been pulled into one conversation, Maya into another. Different people, different tellings. Details shifted. Timelines blurred. Some stories contradicted others outright. The hike gave them space to sort through it. They compared notes, laughed at inconsistencies, tried earnestly to piece together something cohesive from the noise. Who had seen what? Whose parents were where? Which light moved how? The desert listened without correcting them. The path stretched ahead, pale and indistinct, and with every step, the town and its certainty felt a little farther away. Then they saw water. Jesse squinted first. "Mirage," he said, certain. The light shimmered too perfectly, the horizon bending in that familiar desert trickery. Maya shook her head. She pulled the napkin out again, smoothing it carefully, as if it deserved respect. "No," she said, "it's marked here, a reservoir." As they walked closer, the desert resolved the argument for them. Both were right. There was water, but beyond it, farther out, stretched a much larger, glimmering body that wavered and dissolved as they watched. A false lake layered behind the real one, heat bending distance into illusion. Truth and deception sharing the same frame. Up close, the reservoir was tired, shrunken. Its edges cracked and pale, a bathtub ring of salt and mineral staining the earth where water once stood higher. What remained was shallow, murky, stubbornly alive. Not enough to impress, but enough to endure. The land around it told the story. Sparse grasses clung to the dampest ground, greener here than anywhere else they'd seen all morning. Reeds rose in small, defiant clusters, their tips dry and brittle. Insects hovered just above the surface, stitching the air with quiet movement. The smell changed, faintly metallic, faintly organic. Rocks near the water were darker, smoother, as if remembering better days. Beyond that narrow margin, the desert resumed its hold, sand, red soil, scattered brush, and silence. It wasn't a place meant to last. But for now, it was enough to reflect the sky, and whatever else might choose to pass overhead. Cutting cleanly through the ambient stillness, they heard it. A vibration first, low, deliberate. Then a hum, mechanical, man-made. It carried across the open land with unsettling clarity, coming from the direction they'd walked from the road. The jeep. Maya stopped, lifted her arm, pointed. Something coming toward us. They stood there, unsure what instinct to trust. Panic hovered, undecided. This was nowhere, no trailhead, no crowd, no expectation of company. Whatever it was, it hadn't been part of the plan. A UFO, Jesse said lightly, grasping for humor he didn't fully feel. Guess they heard we were curious. Maya didn't laugh. She stepped closer, fingers tightening around his arm. "Stop teasing," she whispered. "UFOs are supposed to be in the sky. This is definitely on the ground." She paused, listening harder. "It's a motorcycle." Then it became unmistakable. The sound resolved into something iconic, deep, throaty, unmistakably alive. A Harley-Davidson, announcing itself with no concern for subtlety. They watched as it crested the low rise. 2 riders. The bike slowed, dust curling lazily behind it, and rolled to a stop about 20 meters away. As the engine cut, the silence rushed back in, thicker than before. Maya exhaled, tension loosening when she noticed the pillion rider was a woman. The couple dismounted easily and began walking toward them. "You owe me some clothes," the man called out. The words landed sharp, but the grin that followed, wide and unmistakable, gave the drama away instantly. Recognition bloomed. Relief followed close behind. He introduced the woman as his wife. Hands were shaken. Names exchanged. A few sentences in, the anxiety dissolved completely, replaced by the peculiar comfort of finding familiar faces in an utterly unfamiliar place. Laughter came easily now. Then the obvious question surfaced why they were here, all of them, at the same time. This wasn't exactly somewhere one stumbled into. It was off the map, off the rhythm, far from anything resembling a tourist stop. "You turned down my guidance last night," the man said, shrugging. "So we figured we'd offer it anyway." They laughed again. He explained that the tire shop owner had mentioned their plans. Company sounded better than solitude, so he'd picked up his wife and ridden out. He added casually that this wasn't unusual for them. They come out here a couple of times a week. Just a ride, just space. "And the guide thing," he said, waving it off. "That was a joke. I'm no guide." He gestured broadly at the land around them. "We run a small cattle ranch not far from here." The desert listened. The reservoir lay quietly nearby. And what had moments ago felt like isolation now felt, strangely, like company had always been part of the plan. Cal gestured toward a cluster of boulders a few meters away, sun-warmed and worn smooth by time, inviting without ceremony. "We can sit there," he said, already moving. They followed, each choosing a spot that felt right, no rules, no arrangement. Maya perched on a flat rock close to the water's edge. Jesse settled beside her, stretching his legs out. Cal leaned back against a larger boulder, his wife sitting comfortably nearby, boots dusted, posture relaxed, as if this landscape were an extension of their living room. And they talked, not about anything important, and yet, somehow, about everything. It's the road, weather, work. The strange pull of places that look empty but aren't. Stories drifted in and out, unanchored, unhurried. Laughter surfaced, then quiet. No one felt the need to fill every pause. The desert absorbed it all, the voices, the silences, the small truths shared between people who hadn't planned to meet but had, all the same. Jesse remembered something suddenly, as if it had been waiting for the right pause to surface. "Why here?" he asked, curiosity edging his voice. "Why so often?" Cal didn't answer right away. He was looking up at the sky, eyes tracing something only he could see. His wife sat quietly beside the water, watching the ripples spread and dissolve, her attention fixed, almost reverent. Neither spoke. Neither even acknowledged the question at first. It wasn't avoidance exactly, more like they were occupied with something that mattered, right then, more than conversation. The silence stretched. Jesse wondered if they were choosing their words, or if silence itself was the answer. Maya felt her unease rise with every passing second. Something had shifted. She sensed it clearly, the air, the posture, the weight of the moment. We crossed a line, she thought. He asked something he shouldn't have. Trying to restore balance, she stood slightly, brushing dust from her jeans. "It's getting late," she said carefully. "We should probably head back and check on the tire. It might be ready by now." It felt like the safest exit, polite, logical, necessary. Then Cal spoke. "It might take a while," he said, still looking at the sky. Then he turned his head toward them, meeting their eyes one by one. "So I mean the tire might not be ready this evening." There was a faint smile on his face, not teasing, not dismissive, gentle, almost reassuring. Maya felt a small release in her chest. "This place," Cal continued, his voice lower now, steadier, "has a lot of memories for us." He looked back up at the sky. "We met our ancestors here." The words landed softly, and yet they struck hard. A chill ran through Maya, sharp and immediate. Goosebumps rose along her arms, uninvited. She wished Jesse were closer, close enough to reach for without thinking. She resisted the urge to move. Beside her, Jesse felt it too. The subtle tightening in the chest, the instinctive alertness. Ancestors, his mind searched for explanations. Ghosts, metaphor, a local joke taken too far. He studied Cal's face, hoping for a hint, a smile, a crack, anything that suggested mischief. There was none, only seriousness. "My father was here when the crash took place," Cal said at last. His voice had deepened, weighted by something older than memory. He exhaled slowly, as if the words themselves required space. "He was a rancher, the ranch I run now. He was grazing cattle right here, when something came down from the sky. Cal lifted his hand, tracing an invisible path. It skipped along the ground, bounced more than once, skimmed over the water. He nodded toward the reservoir, then tumbled a few times and stopped on the far side. He fell silent, deliberately, giving the moment room to settle. Maya and Jesse felt it, the careful pacing, the way he was letting them arrive at what he was saying before going any further. Then Cal looked at them again. "Only a few people know what we're about to share," he said. "And we hope you'll respect what it means. Choose your conscience carefully before putting anything on the internet." He smiled as he said it, but there was no softness in his eyes. No humor, just certainty. Maya felt her stomach tighten. Jesse's mind raced ahead, already colliding with implications, responsibility, disbelief, consequences. This wasn't a campfire story. This wasn't bar talk. They hadn't come prepared for something that asked to be kept. Neither of them spoke. They only looked at each other, at Cal, at his wife, caught between curiosity and the instinct to step back. Cal's wife noticed. "You'll understand why you're hearing this," she said gently, her tone a counterweight to the heaviness. "And just relax." She smiled, warm and grounding. But the air around them had already changed, and the desert, patient as ever, waited for the rest of the story. "One of the two pilots was dead," Cal continued. "The other was alive but badly injured." He spoke evenly, without drama, as if recounting a hard winter rather than something that unraveled the world. "My father reached him first, did what he could. There wasn't time to think. He got him onto a horse and took him back to the ranch before the military arrived." Cal gestured broadly now toward the open land. They came fast, raided the site, swept the area for debris like they were erasing chalk from a board. They questioned my father too, again and again. But he never gave anything away. Cal paused, then pointed toward a distant rise, a mountain whose shadow cut the sky at an odd angle. He hid him there, in a cave, kept him until his wounds healed. "Pilot?" Maya asked, the word slipping out before she could stop it. "Is he?" "Alien?" Cal's wife finished gently, without waiting for the question to land. "Well, if that's what we want to call him." She tilted her head slightly, thoughtful. "I'm not so sure." The answer unsettled Jesse more than any confident declaration could have. Not sure, he thought. Then what was he? The certainty he'd been bracing for never arrived. Instead, ambiguity settled in its place, thicker, more disquieting. Not a monster, not a myth, something harder to name. The water behind them rippled softly. The wind shifted. And Jesse realized, with a quiet unease, that whatever Cal was describing didn't fit neatly into the stories they'd heard at the bar, or anywhere else. His comrades came back for him later, Cal said quietly, a few months after the crash. They took him away. Before he left, he thanked my father and promised he'd return. The promise hovered between them. "Did he?" Maya asked, the question rising before she could stop it. "Yes," Cal said, "he did many times." He let that settle, then added, almost as an aside, "I met them quite a few times growing up." "I did too," his wife said, smiling softly. "With Cal more than once." That was when it truly hit them. Maya and Jesse didn't speak. They couldn't. The words kept arriving, piling gently but relentlessly, and their minds struggled to keep pace. It wasn't fear exactly, more a stunned stillness, like standing too close to something vast to see its edges. Cal continued slower now. They felt guilty, I suppose, he said, about my father. He was exposed to radiation while helping the pilot. It left him sterile. Maya's brow furrowed before she could hide it. Your father, she thought. The contradiction surfaced immediately, unspoken but loud. Cal noticed. He always did. Cal was raised much later, his wife said, answering the question Maya hadn't voiced. He doesn't know his biological parents, never wanted to. She smiled, not sadly, but with a quiet acceptance. Cal nodded. They gave my father directions, told him where to find me. I'd been abandoned at a hospital. He exhaled. That was the best they could do for him. The damage was irreversible. He paused, then added, my father never resented it, not for a second. And my mother, she was at peace with it too. The desert held the silence that followed. The water barely moved. That's why they come here, Maya realized suddenly. The thought arrived whole, uninvited, and settled in her chest. As if he had heard it, Cal nodded. Yes, that's why we come here so often, he said gently. We're hoping to meet them again. And we know they will come. We just don't want to miss them when they do. He smiled, not wistfully, not desperate, certain. Jesse gathered what courage he could and asked the question that had been circling his mind. Are they what they look like on the posters? Cal and his wife burst out laughing, the sound ringing freely across the water. You'll see what they want you to see, Cal said, still chuckling. Then the laughter faded, replaced by something quieter, more deliberate. Our eyes and our brains do the processing. What we see is just the output, like a camera feeding data to a computer. He paused, choosing his words with care. They can talk without talking, let you see things inside your head. Cal glanced at his wife, then back at them. Some Eastern religions talk about abilities like that, he added lightly. So it's not that hard to consider or even mislabel as alien. A small smile. Then seriousness again. When what you see can be manipulated, he said, you start questioning what real even means. He bent down, picked up a small stone, and tossed it into the reservoir. Concentric ripples spread outward, catching the light. See those? He asked. We call them ripples because light reflects off moving water and hits our retina that way. But if you shine a strobe light at the same frequency as the waves, he shrugged. They'd appear frozen, no motion at all. He looked at them closely now. So tell me, are the ripples moving or are they still? Maya and Jesse didn't answer right away. They didn't need to. Their expressions shifted almost in unison, recognition dawning, the physics aligning neatly with the unease already growing inside them. The ripples were neither, just a culmination of ambience at a given time and space. After a long pause, Cal spoke again, his voice lower now, carrying the weight of something settled rather than argued. They were coming here long before we ever were, he said. In a way, they have more right to this land than any of us. He looked out across the water, not at it but through it, as if time itself were layered there. They were the engineers, the parents, the teachers, the guardians of humans, long before archaeology learned how to ask the right questions. His jaw tightened slightly. They were here. They are here. And they'll still be here long after we manage to wipe ourselves out with our own stupidity. He sighed, not in anger, but in resignation. The words didn't feel dramatic. They felt old, as though Cal were repeating something he hadn't invented, only inherited. Maya felt small in a way she hadn't before, not insignificant, but momentary. Jessie stared at the widening rings in the water, thinking about timelines that didn't care about borders, nations, or even species. The desert stayed quiet. It had heard all of this before. This story gets told again and again, Cal said softly. Time after time. But it only continues with those who are worth listening. He glanced at his wife, and she met his look with quiet certainty. We know, he continued, turning back to Jessie and Maya, that one day you'll have your own encounter. And when that happens, your perspective on life will change. He paused, letting the idea breathe. But don't expect it to look the way people imagine, he added. You won't always see a UFO hovering overhead, or a gray figure walking toward you, or wake up in the night thinking you've been taken. Another pause, longer this time. Every time you choose to do something good, he said softly. Every time you pause to feel the weight of someone else's hurt, offer your hand where it's needed, or choose kindness when indifference would be easier, you are already carrying forward what they taught us. You are living their values. His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. As long as we call them alien, he went on, we carve our own destruction, harm to ourselves, to each other, to the world we live on. But love and compassion, he smiled faintly, that's what brings them closer. Maya felt something loosen inside her chest, something she hadn't realized was tight. Once you truly see them, Cal said, their teachings, their way, you'll want them in your life. You'll start seeing them everywhere, every day. He looked at both of them now, fully present. And then, he said quietly, they stop being alien. They become something else. A better version of us. The desert wind moved lightly across the water. The stars burned steady overhead. And one day, Cal finished, almost gently, you'll see them standing in front of you. He smiled. And you'll be ready. With a quick nod to his wife, Cal rose. She followed without a word, the movement practiced, effortless, like this ending had always been agreed upon in advance. They started walking back toward the bike. Your tire should be ready by now, Cal called over his shoulder. Both of them smiled, the kind of smile parents give children when they know something important has been handed over, and nothing more needs saying. Maya and Jessie stood where they were, watching. The Harley roared back to life, its growl rolling across the land, thinning as it moved away. Dust lifted, lingered, then dissolved into the vastness. And just like that, they were gone. What remained was unexpected. A fulfillment, a quiet happiness, a sense of belonging that didn't depend on presence. They felt like children who had just watched their parents leave on a journey without them, an ache rising briefly in the chest, tender and confusing. Sad, yes, but also content, left behind with their own space, their own time, their own toys to explore. The reservoir lay still. The desert breathed. And for the first time since the puncture, since Kingman, since the road itself had gently paused them, and perhaps for the first time in their lives, they felt something settle into place. They had hope. And more importantly, they had a way.